My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to 106.7 Wilmington's Big Talker. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Saturday at 1 p.m. and each Sunday at 5 p.m. we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. In case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of volunteers from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. Welcome to the election episode of Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where today we will discuss what may well be the most important election not only of our lives, but the life of our republic. And as I'm sure you are aware, the insanity from the left surrounding this election continues to mount on the national scene. What you might not be aware of, however, is what the lunatic left fringe is doing right here in our state. We will bring you up to speed on that and what you can do about it. We will also talk about critical races across North Carolina and where candidates stand on both gun issue and constitutional issues in general. We will also talk about political races you might not normally take an interest in, namely judicial races. These races, so often overlooked by conservative voters, are actually critical to defending your individual liberties. But first, this just in gun rights news. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives has issued a cease and desist order to Q Firearms, Q LLC actually, regarding its Honey Badger AR-15 type pistol. Now, this should be of concern to all gun rights supporters. The letter was dated August 3, 2020, but only recently came to light. Specifically, the ATF claims that the Honey Badger, like other AR-15 pistols, is equipped with a pistol stabilizing brace, but they say it is designed to be fired from the shoulder, making the gun a short-barreled rifle, which is strictly regulated under the 1934 National Firearms Act. As an SBR regulated under the NFA, the transfer would have to be approved by the ATF after a multi-month application process, fingerprints, a background check, and a $200 tax stamp for each transfer. Violation of the NFA is a 10-year federal felony. The question becomes how this might apply to the millions of other AR-15 type pistols with stabilizing braces that have been sold in the U.S. market and the millions of gun owners who bought them. To give you some background, under the Obama administration, the ATF first approved pistol stabilizing braces, which looked like shoulder stocks and could in fact be used as a shoulder stock, but then it reversed its position, approving the pistols only if the brace was used as an arm brace, but saying that if the user put the gun to his shoulder, they had, and I quote, redesigned the brace, making it into a shoulder stock and turning the gun into an unregistered short-barreled rifle. It's sort of like saying that if you choose to brush your teeth with a hairbrush, you have redesigned it to be a toothbrush. Well, under the Trump administration, ATF reversed itself and determined that occasional use from the shoulder did not change the classification of the gun from a pistol to a short-barreled rifle, after which sales of AR-15 type pistols exploded. So, when the ATF once again appears to reverse course, it has caused considerable consternation in the gun rights community. Some have likened it to the bump stock ban and theorized that the ATF was about to move on the entire category of AR-type pistols. And by the way, some blamed the Trump administration for this supposed change in policy. More on that shortly. Writing in AmmoLand.com, John Crump takes a somewhat different view, saying, and I quote, "This case is different. 9 months ago, the Department of Justice instructed the ATF's industry side not to move on braces until all parties could agree on standards. Unlike bump stocks, multiple companies have sold millions of braces to Americans, and the industry was working with the ATF to develop the new regulations. Since the ATF could not use their industry side to go after Q because of the DOJ limitations, the agency decided to use its criminal arm to send a cease and desist letter and accuse the company of selling unregistered short-barreled rifles. Sources inside the ATF tell AmmoLand that the investigation and subsequent letter was a result of how Q marketed the Honey Badger. After trying to resolve the issue with ATF, Q went public with a letter to their customers advising them of the ongoing situation and the legal jeopardy. Indeed, the cease and desist letter issued by the ATF specifically cites how Q marketed the Honey Badger, suggesting they might have marketed it as a short-barreled rifle without the paperwork. Moreover, the fact is that the letter to Q was issued more than 2 months ago, and that might suggest they do not intend to move against other guns. Now, the AmmoLand.com piece goes on to quote the National Shooting Sports Foundation, the national lobbying group for gun makers, as saying, and I quote, NSSF has reached out to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, members of Congress, and the White House to seek clarity on this most recent cease and desist notification. When a similar letter was issued to another manufacturer in June, NSSF took similar action, and the ATF reassured the firearm industry that pistol braces were not being reviewed for reclassification and are legal for use on AR pistols. Now, anyone who owns an AR-15 type pistol should be very, very careful when making changes to the gun or when carrying it and using it. I especially recommend you listen to episode 37 of this show, which is available at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, spell out the and, gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, to hear my interview with firearms lawyer John Pierce on the advantages and legal hazards of this class of firearm. Now, as I was recording this show, there has been a late-breaking development. One of the things John Crump did in the AmmoLand piece was to cite insider information saying that acting ATF Director Regina Lombardo was, and I quote, not loyal to the president. Well, in a second piece written by Dean Weingarten, also in AmmoLand.com, and also citing insider information, Associate Deputy Director Marvin Richardson was apparently upset by John Crump's article. According to Weingarten, they also say that Associate Director Marvin Richardson believes pistol braces violate the National Firearms Act. Furthermore, Weingarten discusses the political, dare I say, deep state nature of the ATF, positing that as a political move, the brace rulings signal overconfidence of a Biden victory. I would also add that it looks a lot like a deep state effort to undermine Donald Trump. Which makes it all the more interesting that after Crump and Weingarten wrote their articles, just days ago the ATF put a stay on the cease and desist order, perhaps on the orders of the Trump administration? Who knows? More on this as it develops. Elsewhere, the developing civil war over the future of American government continues. During the Clinton administration, I wrote a piece published in the Charlotte Observer entitled The Barometer of Discontent. Written when people were trying to scale the White House walls and fly airplanes into the Clinton White House, my point was that marginal people might respond irrationally, but they are responding to exactly the same concerns that we law-abiding citizens are. And that is apparently what happened in Michigan last week, when a militia group calling itself the Wolverine Watchmen was apparently arrested by the FBI for plotting to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Yep, they're nutcases, but look at what motivated them. First, that the draconian restrictions enacted by Whitmer are unconstitutional. True. And that they were preparing for civil war, which any number of saner minds have postulated might indeed be the case. Oh, and it just came up that their next on their kidnap list was Virginia Democrat Governor Ralph Northam. they might not be so crazy after all. And to all the leftists who now accuse me of advocating the kidnapping of public officials, please allow me to quote that famous rooster Foghorn Leghorn. I say, that's a joke, son. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7. After a short break, we will return with what leftists are doing to threaten the elections right here in North Carolina. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. In our last segment, we talked about the nascent civil war developing in our country, specifically a plot to kidnap Michigan leftist Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Virginia leftist Governor Ralph Northam. As I noted, the actions of nut jobs act as a barometer of discontent as they respond with extreme measures to very real grievances that afflict all of us. Although the media prefers to focus on right-wing extremists, however, last week we also got a lesson in what happens when a TV station hires a leftist for security, and I use that word in quotes, at a public demonstration. Yes, you've probably heard that a conservative protester was shot by a, quote, security guard for NBC affiliate 9 News, and the ostensibly mainstream media let it be widely known that the security guard was not part of Antifa. But you might not have heard of the background of that so-called security guard. Says the Forward Observer, an excellent intelligence service by Sam Culper, and I quote, Matthew Doloff, an alleged security guard, shot and killed a man after a brief confrontation at a Saturday protest in Denver. Doloff killed right-wing counter-protester Lee Keltner after he slapped Doloff, who allegedly attempted to take Keltner's pepper spray. Doloff is being held for investigation of first-degree murder without bail. Denver police reported that Doloff was not politically affiliated at the protest, but reports revealed a documented history of far-left protest activity and commentary on social media. Leftists online and at the protest celebrated Keltner's death as a victory against alleged white supremacy. But it gets better. According to the Epoch Times, although 9 News claimed that they had hired Doloff from Pinkerton's, Pinkerton denied employing him. Then we have David Codrea writing in AmmoLand.com, who describes Doloff's Twitter feed in greater detail, including Doloff pictured at Occupy Wall Street. He was heavily involved in the Occupy movement, which later pushed members to Antifa. Doloff is a registered Democrat, not just a Democrat, but a socialist, with a love for Bernie Sanders, as expressed by a YouTube playlist dedicated to him. Let's see. The journalist that Codrea quotes says, and I quote, he also has a Space Invaders tattoo, a common logo used among Antifa. Matt Doloff is 100% Antifa. Will mainstream media outlets redact falsities and cover the truth? I doubt it. Moreover, 2 things have become abundantly clear. First, Lee Keltner, the protester who shot Doloff, was there in support of police. Second, by his social media postings, Doloff was a Black Lives Matter supporter, leftist, and Trump opponent. Once again, the self-proclaimed voice of tolerance has spoken, this time by killing yet another conservative. How long will we allow this to continue? Now, let's talk elections, shall we? I recently got a stark reminder that this battle is between 2 competing ideologies, at least one of which, the left, is making their argument completely bereft of facts. Our Political Action Committee, the GRNC Political Victory Fund, does Facebook advertising around the state for pro-gun candidates. One of the ads centered on Joe Biden's recent statement to the press that you, the voter, don't, and I quote, deserve to know whether he will pack the Supreme Court with leftists if he wins the election. We ran the ad under the title Hidin' Joe Biden. Well, the leftists came out of the woodwork like cockroaches, spewing every falsehood and fallacious argument they could muster. The popular fallacy went like this: Joe Biden doesn't need to reveal his position on packing the Supreme Court because Donald Trump refuses to release his taxes. Really. This absurd apples and oranges argument, even if true, which I would argue it's not, but even if true, Trump's taxes have absolutely nothing to do with public policy. By contrast, Joe Biden is refusing to reveal his position on a public policy which would profoundly change the nature of the judicial branch in the United States government. To equate the two is absurd. The other popular fallacy from the left is that it is Republicans who are, and I quote, packing the courts, or that Amy Coney Barrett's appointment is somehow illegitimate. To that, please allow me to respond with what I gave an international news organization that occasionally solicits my commentary. Although Senate Democrats attack Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett over her religious beliefs, neither religion nor complaints by Senators Kamala Harris and Dianne Feinstein that, quote, voting is underway in 40 states are the underlying reasons for their attacks. Equally irrelevant are claims that Republicans are rushing the nomination, or Harris's arguments that holding hearings regardless of COVID-19 is endangering lives, or complaints that Republicans refuse to confirm Barack Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, under similar circumstances. The only relevant considerations in the debate are that under the U.S. Constitution, President Donald Trump is authorized to nominate Barrett, and the Senate is authorized to confirm her, and that by the accounts of her peers, Barrett is highly qualified. All else is merely spin. We are witnessing a power struggle between those who want a Supreme Court which will strictly interpret the law as written and those who want an activist judiciary to reshape America using the socialist model. The results of the Barrett appointment and following it the U.S. election will chart whether America remains a constitutional republic or morphs into a socialist autocracy like Cuba and Venezuela. I bring these things up because you too will likely encounter intellectually dishonest arguments from the left in this election and beyond. They will use straw arguments, ad hominem attacks, diversion, and projecting their own dishonesty onto you. When they do, I encourage you not to argue their diversions, but instead bring the argument back to the central question. In this case, the question is, why won't Joe Biden answer the question on whether he will pack the Supreme Court? To paraphrase Vice President Mike Pence, let the record reflect that leftists have still not answered the question. In the candidate recommendations made by the GRNC Political Victory Fund we put out, we have been widely criticized for only rarely recommending libertarian candidates, since the argument goes libertarians are the most pro-gun candidates in a given race. So let's get real about libertarians, shall we? First, you need to understand the difference between GRNC's Remember in November evaluations, which, by the way, are available at grnc.org. But these are subjective assessments of how closely a given candidate agrees with a control group of gun owners, versus GRNC Political Victory Fund candidate recommendations, which are analyses of the best gun rights voting strategy for a given race. GRNC candidate evaluations list all registered candidates, including libertarians, who, by the way, are not necessarily pro-gun. Well, several libertarians criticized us for not recommending libertarian candidate for governor Stephen DeForey, as well as Liam Lever in North Carolina House District 37, where we recommended pro-gun Republican Aaron Perret. Well, let's look at those libertarian candidates, shall we, since they are representative of libertarian campaigns in general. In their second quarter campaign reports, DeFiore for governor raised a grand total of, wait for it, $2,558.97, and spent the whopping sum of $556.29. By contrast, Republican Dan Forest raised $1.2 million and spent $1.1 million. In his state house run, Lever reported a grand $507.41 in donations. He spent a grand $410.41. Meanwhile, Republican Erin Pare raised $61,000 and loaned her campaign $20,000, suggesting she is willing to put her money where her mouth is. Are these libertarian bids supposed to be serious? Have they done mailings to voters? Even mass email? Hired a campaign consultant? Gone through a candidate boot camp? Do they know how to run a campaign? As a consequence, what percentage of the total vote do you think they're going to get? 2%? 3%? I would imagine they would do very well indeed to get 7% of the votes cast in the race. So what critics recommend is the GRNC PVF make a recommendation for and send gun votes to a candidate who will lose, which incidentally will siphon them away from pro-gun candidates who can actually win. The district Lever is running in, House 37, has a Civitas partisan index of R+3, making it very much in play. The Democrat in the race, Sidney Batch, has pledged for America's goals to defund police, and by the way, they are a partner with Michael Bloomberg's Everytown for Gun Safety, meaning Batch is somebody we want to keep out of the North Carolina House. The pattern of poorly run libertarian campaigns is the rule rather than the exception, right up to the presidential bid and the party itself. It is not enough to be on the ballot, and there will be no serendipitous victories. Winning elections is hard work involving unpleasant tasks like fundraising. If candidates aren't willing and able to do that, they shouldn't denigrate GRNC PVF for not recommending them. Incidentally, candidate information can be found at grnc.org. Right now you're listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom. After a short break, we will return with what leftists are doing to control the election right here in North Carolina. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. In this segment, we're going to talk about some important races in North Carolina. Grab a pen because shortly we will be giving you some down-ballot choices you might not be aware of. First, let's talk about the U.S. Senate race between incumbent Republican Thom Tillis and Democrat challenger Cal Cunningham. GRNC Political Victory Fund recommends Thom Tillis for U.S. Senate. So, you hate Senator Thom Tillis? Well, stand in line. You probably don't hate him as much as I do. But the upcoming race isn't about Thom Tillis. It's about potential left-wing control of the U.S. Senate, which right now Las Vegas odds makers are favoring Democrats to win. This is one of 4 pivotal races for control of the U.S. Senate. If we lose the Senate, rabidly anti-gun Senator Chuck Schumer will be Senate Majority Leader, and the filibuster, which has been used to kill numerous gun control proposals, will end, ensuring leftist control of the chamber. Democrat challenger Cal Cunningham studiously avoided putting himself on record on gun issues while he was in the North Carolina Senate and has repeatedly refused GRNC's candidate survey. He is no friend of gun owners. Again, a protest vote against Tillis, however much he deserves it, will only serve to give Schumer and the Democrats an opportunity to end private gun ownership as we know it. And frankly, a vote against Tillis is a vote for Chuck Schumer for Senate Majority Leader. Oh yes, let us not forget that early this year, when Nancy Pelosi was trying to depose a duly elected president by impeaching him on nonsensical charges, Cal Cunningham told the Raleigh News and Observer that he would vote for impeachment. As an added note, Cunningham is now under fire for a sexual relationship with a woman not his wife, demonstrating his lack of character, but do not assume for a moment that that makes him out of the running. Vote Thom Tillis for U.S. Senate. For governor, GRNC PVF strongly recommends Republican challenger Dan Forest over anti-gun Democrat incumbent Roy Cooper, who, by the way, has a 58% voting record on gun issues, Giarinski's zero-star evaluation when he was in the North Carolina Senate. Over decades, Cooper has been a consistent enemy of gun rights, most recently vetoing HB 652, which would have expanded concealed carry into churches that are co-located with educational property. By contrast, Forrest has consistently stood tall for the Second Amendment. Any vote for a third-party candidate in this race should be effectively considered a vote for Cooper and against gun rights. For lieutenant governor, Giarinski Political Victory Fund recommends Republican Mark Robinson over Democrat Yvonne Lewis Holley, who, by the way, in the North Carolina House had a gun rights voting record of 7%. After Robinson's impassioned speech against gun control at the Greensboro City Council, and it went viral, Giarinski awarded him an honorary life membership. He currently serves on the board of directors for the NRA and has made gun rights and freedom the centerpiece of his campaign. One North Carolina congressional district has drawn the particular attention of leftists, namely the open seat in the 11th Congressional, where the previous incumbent, conservative Mark Meadows, moved on to become Donald Trump's chief of staff. The race pits Republican Madison Cawthorn, a young conservative who embodies the future of the conservative movement, against Democrat Mo Davis, who is a retired Air Force colonel but very much a leftist. Mo is quite a piece of work, and he gained infamy from his tweets saying things like, quote, "Screw, they go low, we go high, bull expletive. When NCGOP extremists go low, we stomp their scrawny, pasty necks with our heels, and once you hear the sound of a crisp snap, you grind your heel hard and twist it slowly side to side for good measure. Nice guy, huh? This is one example among many which induced one Facebook observer to say, "Mad Mo's gotta go." I told him I was going to steal that. Apparently, Mo's threats of violence have been taken to heart by the Antifa types in our own little Portland, namely Asheville, where not only did the Antifa types vandalize Cawthorn's campaign signs across the district, but even the disabled candidate's home. As one media account put it, Mad Mo's leftism might appeal to the leftists of Asheville, but will hopefully not play well with other communities in the district. In the 11th Congressional District, Giarinski PVF strongly recommends Madison Cawthorn. Now, let's talk about some races you might not consider when you vote. Far too often, gun voters fail to vote in judicial elections, figuring they really don't matter that much when defending gun rights. But nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, one of the hurdles that North Carolina gun owners face in the 2020 elections results from left-wing judges throwing out political districts drawn by our elected representatives and then forcing their replacement with districts that are more favorable to left-wing Democrats. So make certain to vote judicial races, including local district court races. Now, here are the statewide judicial candidates that gun rights supporters should vote for, starting with North Carolina Supreme Court Chief Justice Paul Newby, North Carolina Supreme Court Associate Justice, Seat 2, Phil Berger Jr., North Carolina Supreme Court Associate Justice, Seat 4, Tamara Berenger, Court of Appeals, Seat 4, April Wood, Court of Appeals, Seat 5, Fred Gore, Court of Appeals, Seat 6, Chris Dillon, Court of Appeals, Seat 7, Jeff Carpenter, and finally, Court of Appeals, Seat 13, Jefferson Griffin. Again, to repeat, particularly the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Paul Newby, Associate Justice Phil Berger Jr. and Tamara Berenger, and then Court of Appeals, April Wood, Fred Gore, Chris Dillon, Jeff Carpenter, and Jefferson Griffin. Again, this information is available at grnc.org. Also of interest are races for the North Carolina House, in which a couple of dozen Democrats have signed a pledge to defund police. Yes, calls to defund the police aren't just a feature of leftist governments in places like Portland anymore. Now they are coming from Democrat candidates right here in North Carolina. A few weeks back, North Carolina House Speaker Tim Moore held a most interesting press conference in which he discussed a left-wing policy organization called America's Goals, which dangled money in front of Democrat candidates willing to sign its pledge. And a most interesting pledge it is, advocating as it does the agenda of the hard left. Candidates of the ilk of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Bernie Sanders, and their ilk, including a pledge to defund police. In dangling the hook, this left-wing organization caught dozens of North Carolina House Democrats. We're particularly interested in 7 Democrats who signed the defund police pledge and are running in competitive districts, like Democrat Christy Clark in Mecklenburg County, where she won a seat previously held by Republican John Bradford, despite the district being R+5. Better yet, Clark was an activist for Bloomberg's AstroTurf gun ban organization, Moms Demand Action, and has introduced several gun control bills in the General Assembly. We're taking a particular interest there. Joe Sam Queen, who hails from Western North Carolina, District 119 with a Civitas R+2 rating, and has voted wrong on gun issues nearly every time, despite living in a rural district where just about everybody owns guns. Or Democrat Ray Russell, a former university professor with all the political leanings that might imply, who's in an R+3 district. Other defund police signers in tight races include Pitt County, District 9, where anti-gun Democrat Brian Farkas is running against pro-gun incumbent Perrin Jones. In Wake County, District 37, where pro-gun Republican Aaron Perret is challenging anti-gun incumbent Sidney Batch. Cumberland County, District 45, where we have pro-gun Republican John Zoka defending his seat against anti-gun Democrat Francis Jackson. Guilford County, District 59, where pro-gun Republican John Hardister is being challenged by radical anti-gun Democrat Nicole Quick, and Mecklenburg County, District 104, where pro-gun Republican Don Pomeroy is challenging anti-gun Democrat Brendan Lofton. All of these signed a pledge to defund police. All of these are in very competitive districts. Again, candidate information is available at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. Right now, you're listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker. After a short break, we will return with how biased media is trying to rig the elections, not only nationally, but right here in North Carolina. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker. If you need more motivation to vote early, the Forward Observer just noted that several Black Lives Matter organizations are holding recruiting and resistance training events this month leading up to the November election. This smacks of the sort of voter intimidation committed by the Black Panthers in past elections when they hung around polling places with baseball bats. Once again, the left, which accuses you of voter suppression, are the ones actually doing it. I suggest you go to the polls immediately and don't wait for Election Day. And of course, after Election Day, it's likely to be a national bloodbath as Antifa types are preparing for a national insurrection in the event of a Trump win. Before I move on to my monologue, something just came in. As you know, the GRNC Political Victory Fund, our gun rights PAC, is recommending Mark Robinson for lieutenant governor. Mark is the patriot who stood before the Greensboro City Council to defend his Second Amendment rights, the video for which went viral and made him a sensation as not only an articulate gun rights supporter, but as one of relatively few black gun rights supporters. And this, by the way, before he actually owned any guns. In fact, GRNC awarded Mark a life membership, and 2 years ago, in conjunction with Gun Owners of America, awarded him his first firearm, a Glock. As usual, the left is all for black candidates, unless they're conservative, at which point the Democrats consider them not just off the reservation, but in this case, off the plantation. So the Charlotte Observer just ran a piece entitled Michael Bloomberg Group Pours $2.5 million into a Low-Profile North Carolina Race. Yep. Gun ban billionaire Michael Bloomberg is spending $2.5 million in a lieutenant governor race to defeat Robinson and elect Yvonne Lewis Holley, who in internet parlance is a POS, who had a grand 7% gun rights voting record when she served in the North Carolina House. Incidentally, when you pull up the Charlotte Observer article, it looks like a campaign ad for Holley, complete with a lead photo straight out of her campaign. So unless you want Bloomberg to run your life, vote for Mark Robinson for lieutenant governor, and make sure others do too. I will say it again, for candidate and voting information, go to grnc.org, that's grnc.org. I'm not normally one for hyperbole, but if there has ever been an election in U.S. history in which the system has so thoroughly stacked the deck against traditional Americans, I'm not aware of it. If you watch Fox News, you've probably seen that a hard drive has been found containing emails indicating that Joe Biden was indeed involved in the corruption of getting his son, Hunter Biden, a multi-million-dollar gig with the Ukrainian oil exploration company Burisma. Of course, if you watch the rest of the ostensibly mainstream media, you wouldn't know that. And if you did know about it and tried to relay it on Twitter, your post might have been blocked, and maybe your account was suspended, like, say, White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany when she tried to send the tweet about Biden, or the New York Post, which broke the story, or even President Donald Trump's campaign Twitter account when he tried. I started pointing out left-wing media bias back in the early 1990s, but that was child's play compared to what we see today. At this point, no objective person could seriously deny that the media has taken a hard left turn and is now advocating both socialism and leftist candidates whose agendas are rooted in socialism. In fact, what we are seeing now is no longer just bias, it is now censorship, not only in social media, but even the ostensibly mainstream media. Censorship that might not be readily apparent when, for example, you try to do a Google search. As I research a book I'm writing, I routinely search for events I know happened, only to have Google return no results. What a coincidence. Now, the breaking news is that Joe Biden's ABC town hall turns out to have been as rigged as everything else the media has done of late, including having questioners which included a former Obama speechwriter and the wife of a Pennsylvania Democrat candidate. Oh, and the moderator of the town hall was George Stephanopoulos, communications director for Bill Clinton. Meanwhile, on the competing town hall with NBC, the network took heat for even allowing Donald Trump to speak, since, of course, censorship is the order of the day. Afterward, the Washington Post proudly proclaimed, and I quote, "Savannah Guthrie grilled Trump like few others have, taking the heat off NBC for its town hall," meaning that the only reason leftists weren't canceling NBC for allowing Trump to even speak was that the network had been woke enough to bias the format against him. Such is the nature of modern political debate. Now, we could talk about where that left term came from. Frankly, it started with the Marxists in the Frankfurt School and its Institute for Social Research, where Antonio Gramsci engineered what eventually became known as the Long March through the institutions, namely the multi-generational effort to take over, see if this sounds familiar, our cultural institutions, our media, and our schools. Or in 1937, when Gramsci brought his critical theory, a socialist social theory designed to tear down capitalism, to Columbia University. That critical theory and its recent offspring, critical race theory, have now become standard fare in the universities that turn out our latest generation of so-called journalists. Indeed, right here in North Carolina, McClatchy Newspapers bought out all of the largest newspapers in the state, and now runs coordinated campaigns for leftists through the Charlotte Observer, the Raleigh News and Observer, and the Durham Herald-Sun. On their editorial pages, they no longer bother with any semblance of fairness, much less objectivity. Trust me, because I used to write op-eds for the Observer, and now I can't get the time of day from them. And, of course, editorial is no longer confined to the editorial pages, but has now creeped out onto the front page, masquerading as news. Witness the campaign ad I just mentioned for anti-gun Democrat Yvonne Lewis Holly, which was masquerading as a Charlotte Observer news piece. Moreover, bias is no longer confined to the media, as now the Presidential Debate Commission has joined the leftist fray. As you may have heard, C-SPAN political editor Steve Scully, who was supposed to moderate the now canceled second debate, claimed his Twitter account had been hacked after it came to light that he was getting his talking points from Trump critic Anthony Scaramucci. Well, now he's in hot water because the claim that his account was hacked was bogus. Or here in North Carolina, where the Democrat-controlled Board of Elections is engaged in a cage match to try and weaken absentee balloting requirements. With a federal court criticizing their settlement with left-wingers, a state court allowing it, and now an appeals court putting out on hold their scheme for, some indefinite period of time. This is the death match for our society, folks. And from some of you, I'm hearing that the deck might be too stacked against us, that there isn't a dime worth of difference between the candidates, that the system might be so broken that voting won't help. In fact, I hear all manner of fatalistic reasons for not doing anything. But of course, there's always an excuse for inaction. Yes, the left has the deck stacked against us. Yes, the media is against you. The intellectuals are against you. The judiciary is against you. The deep state, even our own Board of Elections, is against you. In fact, all the supposedly enlightened are against you. Because, of course, you and I are in Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables. As a real American, you are bitterly clinging to God and your guns. And, of course, that is the appeal of Donald Trump. For whatever flaws he may have, he holds the vision for returning us to a traditional America, to make America great again. Actually, I would argue that it is precisely why Donald Trump draws fire from statists of both parties, and why Antifa, BLM, and other radicals have come out of the woodwork, because we're actually starting to reverse some of the trends. Until 2016, they didn't have to get militant, because the country sauntered leftward regardless of whether Republicans or Democrats ran it. Now, with Trump's America First immigration and economic policies reversing the trend, they could no longer stand it. Now, maybe the fatalists are right. Maybe the tipping point has been reached. Maybe there's no return from the lurch towards socialism. But you know what? I'm not going to go down without a fight, and neither is Grassroots North Carolina. Let me play you a clip that has always been my motto.
Now remember, when things look bad and it looks like you're not going to make it, then you got to get mean. I mean plumb mad dog mean. Because if you lose your head and you give up, then you neither live nor win. That's just the way it is.
So go vote, people, and win this election. My name is Paul Vlone. You've been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, where each Saturday at 1 and each Sunday at 5 we give you the ammunition to better defend your right to keep and bear arms. Please check out our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop, at hyattguns.com. I also encourage you to check out my website at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, spell out the and, gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, where you can find both my writings and earlier versions of the show.